dig into the soil, start off the year right. We know that like soil is the foundation. So,
Hmm.
I'm going to hand it over. Matt, take it away.
Well, thank you for having me. Can you all hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I wasn't expecting to be in my car. I thought I would be in the comfort of my home. But as you can see, I've got a lot of boxes and they're all filled with books. And today is the day when my books have finally arrived in bulk. So Forgotten Food Forest. It's actually about it's a historical fiction, but it's based on a real food forest in Morocco. And regenerative soil, which is kind of what I think what we're talking about today. We can talk about whatever you all want to talk about. But let me see. Can we pin my video? Is that possible?
I think it is. Yeah, I think that I can.
I've pinned you already. Are you not? Is it not showing up?
Not to my view, but okay. Anyway, I basically have been waiting, as many of you may have, for your Christmas gifts and packages all December, and like certain things just never came. My books, we just had to just go into a warehouse and then find out that part of the reason why it was a week late was someone like 2 steps down the line refused to sign a piece of paper because they weren't just given $15. So I have my books now. It's like the season of if anything can go wrong, it will. Have you guys noticed this? It's like, it's like if you think it might, is it a little bit risky? It's risky. And we are in that season now. And so I am trying to, roll with the punches as they come towards us and then celebrate the wins, because I am so stoked. This is my first hardcover. And I love making books. I was a high school English teacher, and before that I was a musician, and I'm a very enthusiastic person, and I love pursuing curiosity and conversing about ideas. And I've always just gotten a lot of energy from just exchange and talking to people. And so I was a high school teacher, and what happened was I was teaching my kids how to do a Kickstarter. And it was at one of those schools where everyone was on a laptop, it was a charter school. And I was trying to motivate them. And then I came up with an idea to demonstrate. And the idea was to write permaculture curriculum. And it went really, really well. And it went so well that I left my job. And so this is what I do full time. I write curriculum, and I create educational materials, and maybe entertaining educational materials at times. But the whole point is so that we can guarantee a brighter future, a more regenerative future, one that is based on permaculture ethics, earth care, people care, and future care. And if we can get that taught and understood broadly, we'll live in a completely different world. And so I've been trying to create the bridge. And I mean, arguably I have been, but I've been building this bridge of education to the regenerative economy, so that not only, because the reality is it's like our educational system and the way we train people leads to jobs, and their skill sets lead to like jobs and an economy that needs them. And that makes sense. And increasingly we've had this growing disconnection between that. And so when I was a teacher, my students didn't have a real guarantee of being like having a solid guarantee that college would give them the kind of skill set they needed to survive in the world. And this increasing disconnect has created this friction. And so for me, I had to find an answer. I was, a high school teacher, And so I'm like, all these students, they are asking hard questions. They're smart. They deserve, equal opportunities like everyone does. You know what I mean? They deserve a chance. And so it was permaculture that helped me find a pathway for everyone, so that we could create a ethical system in which everyone could, through doing the right thing, through putting in hard work, through being a good person, so they could they could have the kind of life that I believe that we all deserve. I really want to see things scale a lot bigger. And so that's why now, I mean, I'm doing these books, I'm doing my courses online, but I've started this free sort of jobs training, job expo, entrepreneurship expo kind of event this week, www.r-future.world. If you just look up r-future, you'll find it, I'm sure. But it's an event that's online, it's free, and it's for everyone to learn about this new economy, to meet and learn from people who have started their own businesses that are regenerative, that are permacultural, and that are ethical, and make the world a better place, so that they can see themselves in that position, and they can see themselves supporting people in those positions. And it's free, and it really is, again, just part of that arc. I'm trying to create this bridge to that future that doesn't exist clearly or widespreadly or broadly enough for people to all participate in. And the reality is the powers of nature don't change. The universal laws of nature don't change. The abundance and the insights and the partnerships and the synergy, they may have subtle differences, but there's universalities to them in all climates. And so we really have this opportunity, especially as things are breaking down, and there's this recognition that we live in a degenerative system, that we have broken systems, that we have things that need revision, that with things that need to just be composted. We have a lot of things, and we need to take advantage of that these problems and see them as opportunities. And what I've been doing is I've been trying to fill that gap. As a teacher, I mean, it's like, wow, there's nothing permacultural for kids. There's nothing permacultural for like the teenagers, and then there's nothing, and there's like permaculture for retirees, right? Initially, right? People who had land, who wanted to retire, who wanted to save money, and then it started working with 20 somethings. But for a long time, there was no higher level permaculture. There was no advanced permaculture. And so that's also something I've been working on too. And we're getting there. We really are getting there. What I've seen is that we have all the pieces, we have all the science. We just need to get people living it, and then people explaining it in a way that spreads. And it's hard to spread things in the current environment, as we all know. There's a lot of rapids in these waters, or breakers, and so it's difficult. But I believe that it's the only option that we have, partnering with the actual system that gave rise to us, the actual system that gives us our health, the actual systems that provide the oxygen, that cycle the CO2. All the actuals are nature. And I grew up in a world that didn't even consider them. I think of that as like 80s think, right? Like the 80s world where like things are like the 80s progress, they're like, everything's going to get better. Everyone gets synths. And I'm a musician, so, but for real though, I grew up in a world where you didn't question authority, where if you couldn't look it up in the local library, it wasn't real. You didn't see it on the news, it didn't happen. Like, I grew up in a very controlled world, and that's just not the world we live in anymore. Like the textbook at your high school, like it's like very acceptable now to be like, yeah, well, there's plenty of things that are probably not perfectly right in there. Like that was not the case. Like, it was like a reveal in college, or my second high school. I went to boarding school halfway through high school, went from public to private. And it was like a reveal when they're like, oh yeah, well, that's actually not true about Columbus, you know? And it's like, wait, what? Like, I remember that moment when like I heard the real story of Columbus, you know what I mean? And people grow up now knowing these things and wanting like a better system, a better representation, better everything. And it's holistic. We want better food. We want better health. We want better education. We want authentic heroes. We want integrity in our leadership. Like, we want the real, because we figured out we didn't have it. And I feel like a huge part of my work is getting people the lenses to determine that for themselves. And so we talked about permaculture earlier in the conversation. People are taking PDCs. I love the PDC. I didn't do a PDC for a long time because I didn't want it to end at the piece of paper. I wanted to go further. I wanted us to honor the action of doing it. So that's kind of where I'm at. I want people to, I don't do consulting. Like, I don't do the designer thing. I show up for 2 hours and like charge people and all that stuff. I want to teach people so that they can do it all themselves, because it's a mentality, it's a mindset, it's a way of seeing the world, and it changes everything. And as you will find out from doing a PDC, after a while and the information distills in, it is a beginning. It's a window into a completely new world. And when you start developing, and I would say that I've definitely developed my lenses after writing several books on permaculture, writing, an advanced book on permaculture, the first cited and peer-reviewed permaculture book. And it was the first cited since Bill Mollison's 1989 book. So I really feel that once you start delving into the lenses and what becomes permaculture becomes common sense, you begin to see all these nuances and all this. You just begin to see the world in a completely different way, and realize that it's a lifetime of learning. And that's exactly what happened with this book for me. Is it was a completely different, like, do you know there's another side to pH? There's like a twin that creates an XY axis with pH. And it's the actual corrosion rate of each element. So the minerals, in the soils that are like the nutrients, we always kind of smash those words together. But the actual elements have corrosion rates. So, and it's set to pH here and EH here. And EH is measured in millivolts. So we are just entering a completely new modality in our understanding of our world. And it's not, and I'm going to say this now, I'm not a doctor, but I know from insiders in the science world that, and the next thing that's going to come out is how this all deals with the medical. Because all of our bodies, all the plants, the soil, all life, the sky, rain, water, everything is bioelectric, and there's a physics to it. There's a behavior to it, there's properties to it, and they're all interconnected. and you can understand them fluently. I'm developing my fluency still, even after like one of the coolest things about when I created this was Chris Trump said this book was an open door, a portal that people can pass through, because I didn't kind of dictate things. I opened the door and didn't like put pins in things, because we're just opening up. We're entering a new space. Let me keep going with the EH-pH thing. So you may have soils whose pH is perfect. And then you have something happen, like a disease or a virus or a pest or a toxicity or a deficiency. And you're like, I'm in the Goldilocks zone of pH. What could be happening? And maybe your soils are kind of like locked up and like acting weird. And maybe they're not as nice as the pH kind of shows they should be. And you're like wondering what's going on. And so much of it is this graph. Here, let me show you this graph. So I think things might be backwards because of the camera. I apologize for that. But you can get the idea. All right, so I color coded the EH charts to show you the desirable things and the less desirable things. So you can actually know the EH, pH for certain things. What's really incredible is you begin to understand why certain things are macronutrients, because their EH, pH are all through, excuse me, box, are through the roof. So it's like plants had to evolve with these being macronutrients, because the pH and EH is so wide and broad. So EH we measure with millivolts. I'll get to what it is in a second here. But because it's so broad, the plants had to evolve with these being ubiquitous. They couldn't get rid of these, and they couldn't transform them as well. Right? So they had to work with them as their whole cations. All right. So EH is the soil's redox potential. Okay. Bear with me. We're going to get into chemistry now. So redox is reduction, and it is not the loss of something. Okay, it's really screwy in chemistry. Okay, so when you gain electrons, it's reduction. When you gain in energy, it's reduction. Let's forgive them. But oxidation is the loss of electrons. And I'm going to put a caveat here for a second. It's something I had to wade through and weed out of my book, so it was super clear and I was careful. Different branches of science have different definitions for the word oxidation, and it could mean a loss of electron or a gain of oxygen or both, or even another thing. And it's in my book, but we won't get into that. I don't want to confuse anyone, but I've already. But what we need to understand, though, is EH is the oxidation reduction rate. So oxidation is the removal of electrons, and reduction is the gain. I'm gonna add another layer. It's a little complexity. When something gains electrons, something else is losing it. So it's perspective based. Okay. The complexity grows, but this is the real world. It's always going to be like this. It's the differentials between pH and EH in the soil, in the rhizosphere around the roots, that actually allows us to exchange things. It's the difference between things that allows things to flow and exchange. And so soil redox is incredibly important. And in fact, redox itself, the concept, is going to change everything. if you guys have ever heard of that guy, Dr. Zach Bush, the triple board certified cancer doctor, I inherited Crohn's disease, and his special drink to help fix the gut lining, literally the action it takes is it increases the charge in the outside of our cells. It increases the charge in the outside of our cells, and that makes us healthier, has better digestion. And if we think about that in redox terms, well, more energy, well, those are like protons and electrons. And so that's reduction. And so we suddenly see that, and then we bounce out. Let's bounce out to further, right? And it's not the metaphysics. This is straight up. This is the chemistry of soil and water, like for real. This is not anything woo-woo. I spent a lot of time talking to world-leading authors of journals, scientific journals, world-leading journal authors, and it's stunning. It is stunning because it's the other half of photosynthesis. Okay, so let's think about photosynthesis for a second. You've got these photons coming down. They're causing photosynthesis, and what are they doing with those photosynthates? Oh, the photosynthetic products are all going into the soil. Half them or more are going into the soil. And so what they're doing is they're putting all their energy. So what's going on is that they're investing in this exchange. The ideal food for plants comes from microbes in the soil, in the rhizosphere specifically. And so it's the mycorrhizal fungi, which was mentioned earlier, mycorrhizae, very, very good. But it's also rhizophagia. That's when the roots are literally eating the bacteria and fungi. This was recently discovered. And so they're putting out, protons in exchange for cations. They're putting out carbonaceous exudation. And so they're releasing the photosynthetic sugars. And they can't even help it. And how do we know this? Well, when they're not healthy, they're releasing simple sugars, which attracts the bacteria and not the more sophisticated fungi, which is the polysaccharide side of the world. And the polysaccharides are going to protect things. They're going to invite the good guys, and that only comes from healthy plants. So we know they can't help it. They're going to be doing photosynthesis and bringing down. They're going to be reducing if they're in healthy soils. So yeah, there's a lot of information I discovered while writing and researching this book that totally made me rethink a lot of the things I've been doing and recommending, like hot compost. Let's think about that through the redox, right? Let's think about it together. Okay, so oxides, right? Okay, we oxidize. Okay. Oxides, those are the things that are like non-soluble. We don't want those. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to turn my compost, my hot compost. I'm going to make sure there's a lot of oxygen in there. I'm going to, wait a second. We're oxidizing the pile. Holy cow. That's why there's so much CO2 released. We're oxidizing it. Okay. We are literally chemically burning with oxygen that pile down, because decomposition happens in only two different ways: fermentation and oxidation. So redox suddenly takes a different, like completely different thing. I literally could talk months about all this stuff. It's incredible once you start thinking about it and seeing all the connections, because it literally all connects. So our plants are bringing down energy into the soil, and the reality is they're storing it in the organic matter. So all this time we've been talking about organic matter, and then you've probably heard many different stories about organic matter in the soil. Organic matter is food for microbes. But if it was food for microbes, wouldn't all the organic matter just keep disappearing? More true is that it's a byproduct of biological activity. Um, and it's habitat, but it is also at times fuel. But it's really incredibly important to delve into the details. So and this is because the reservoir for all that energy flows into the organic matter. And when we talk about cation exchange capacity, well, cations, they're the ones with the plus on them. And they're the ones that are exchanged with the protons, the H pluses that are coming off the roots of our plants. So as these plants are able to put out these exudates and put out these protons, they're actually allowing for this exchange, the more our soil can hold these nutrients, hold these different properties, the higher the capacity is to hold energy, which means it has the more organic matter, which means it has the lower EH. When we go really low EH, we get like peat moss, right? We get this acidic peat moss. And then when we go really high EH and end up in the alkaline dry desert area. So what I wanted to show you, what I was running over here to show you, was the chart that shows the different states, because it is all related. It really is. Here's photosynthesis seen through the eyes of the electrical world. So what happens, sadly, when our soils aren't good or when there's not enough photosynthesis, is our plants put out the means of their own destruction, essentially. And then we probably all have seen this as gardeners, that plant that brings in the pest, it's doing it itself. It's all doing it. And now see this right here, this tells us, well, let's back up, Matt. This channel, new book. This tells us the ideal zone right here. And in that top upper left corner, it's acid and oxidized. It's this dry, oxidized aerobic soil, low organic matter. And then alkaline and oxidized, that's low photosynthesis, nutrient deficiency, and or toxicity, drought, or shade. And then alkaline and reduced, that's compacted, waterlogged soils. And then acid and reduced is the wet, well-structured aerobic soil with high organic matter levels. So aerobic is still there. It wasn't wrong, but you don't build aerobic soils by oxidizing, compost. And Elaine Ingham no longer is turning her piles every other day. Dr. Elaine Ingham, the compost expert that everyone references and everything. She's my soil mentor. And I've helped her with some of her books. She's helped me with all of my books. But we've gotten to this place now where we're really in this very interesting exchange. And everything's very, very fresh. It's incredible what's going on right now in soil science. Basically, with the information in this book, you can grow food faster. You can grow food more nutritious, higher nutrient density levels, and then you get these higher yields. So you reach the genetic full potential of plants, and then they're disease and pest resistant, and virus resistant. Not again like pests, mind you, like bugs, like the beetles and all those kinds of things. Not like your chipmunks, because we have to remember, like the mice, chipmunks, the deer have this basically the same digestion, not perfectly the same, but basically the same digestion as us. They're mammals, and so it's different for them. So you can have the best plant in the world, but they aren't going to be resistant to a hungry deer. If it gets in your fence. And I like to do living fences as a way of feeding the deer and distracting them. But yeah. I just wanted to share this with you because there's so much new insights that come from this idea of EH, this idea of oxidation, this idea of how much energy is being held in the soil. Yeah, that's the soilfoodweb.com, that link that was just put up. Elaine does great work. Elaine focuses on compost and teaching other people to do compost. And I focus on everything that has to deal with soil, because the reality is not everyone needs to or wants to turn a compost. And the reality that we've discovered is not turning the compost is how you get the most beneficial and the largest diversity and the largest amount of biology. There's a lot of new things. And the reason Elaine stopped doing turn compost is because Johnson Su's research, Dr. Johnson and his wife, and their product Johnson Su composting, they're bioreactors. They're static bioreactors. And you're putting them in place, you're leaving them for a year. So now suddenly grandma's compost doesn't sound so crazy or backwards, does it? Right? You know, that static compost has a ton of value, incredible value, that the hot compost just can't even touch, for real. So yeah, I feel like, again, I've written a book and worked with dozens and dozens of experts. I read more than I've ever read for anything I've ever worked on. I've had to learn the biochemistry of microbes. I've had to delve into the most difficult reading and subject matter. I've had to learn chemistry, like raw chemistry. And then be able to differentiate the lab chemistry from the biochemistry, and then the biochemistry, lab chemistry from the field chemistry, and differentiating all these has been the journey I've been on, so that I could create a manual that would show visually, because there's never been in the history of the world, and this is the craziest thing I discovered, probably, this took me 2.5 months. There's never been anywhere, even online, all the soil cycles for all the soil nutrients for plants. Not even the basic 14 they thought, like in the 90s, the 14, right? No, none of it. So, of course, you know, there's the phosphorus cycle. Here, let me get close so you guys can see this. So, yeah, I've got the pHs, I've got the caveats. And so you can look at those corrosion rate charts, the EH, pH charts, and then look at the visual. And then you're like, oh, I know why this is this way then and this way then. And that's the thing. I want you to actually have the lens, the visual, the fluency, the micro to macro understanding that only seeing can give, only understanding the actual, like the interactions, the connections. And that's, you know, really what permaculture gave me, is this idea that everything's connected. So you can, you know, put things like this. And so I have this for everything. I have visuals for everything. Let's go to something obscure. Let's go to molybdenum. So everyone's like, what are you going to do for your mow, right? Well, we know where it's cycling. We know where it's from. We know how to get it. And not only that, I have sources and forms. I have toxicity and deficiency, what to do in both instances for every single element. I go over all the different soil testing types because they discovered something. How many of you have done a soil test before? You've done the little shaker test, you know? They've proven that there's little to no correlation between what your plant uptakes and those tests. So the soil tests that even the universities are doing, when they give you back this percentage, this is what's in our region, you know, this is the soil assay. That's not what our plants take up. Nope. And so there is now a revolution of testing, and there are people who are doing plant sap test analysis. And it's not just plants getting like a picture of one leaf. They're getting the oldest leaf and the newest leaf. And What is Elaine doing? Elaine is doing her compost tea and her compost. And she's doing her rule that she created. You know, the thing was, Elaine, she created the protocols. She created the hot compost protocols so that they could be acceptable at a national level, at an industrial level. And we're not going to get rid of hot compost for industrial composting. But and her protocols for her benchmarks for yeah, like her benchmarks are hundreds to thousands of bacteria per field of view, one or more strands of mycorrhizal fungi every 5 fields, one or more beneficial protozoa, amoeba, or flagellates every 5 to 10 fields, and one beneficial nematode per drop of soil water. So those are her, and then I've got, you know, her recipes and all, but that's what she's been doing. Elaine started working with her dad in the laboratory in University of Minnesota when she was 6. So she was, and this is covered in my advanced course. Not many people know this, but in the 90s, they were still creating compost that killed things and they didn't know why. She created the first ecological monograph with her husband and 2 or 3 other experts, and everyone individually represented like one of the elements of the soil food web. I've got an updated soil food web in here as well. It's really critical to get more sophisticated with it to show the different relationships. And so this is the most recent, the most up-to-date soil food web out there. And right below it is all Elaine's points about, there's a direct quote from her about soil food web. But what was I saying? I got distracted by the picture. Can you remind me what I was saying, Angel? I can't hear you.
You know, you were talking about the lens of like being able to see the soil better, and then you sort of I asked the question about Elaine's composting, you know,
right?
And so yeah, I know that someone else, you know, like kind of bringing up this like idea of more passive composting. Someone asked in the chat, like, would trench composting or something like that be better than doing like, you know, what traditionally people have done with like turning their compost and doing
right. Yeah, I can go back to that. Yeah, so thank you, I appreciate that. I it's easy to get on tangents when everything is related, you know, when everything relates to everything. Very easy and flows with my mind. But I would say that the thing that I've also learned about and is plant growth promoting bacteria and fungi, and biofertilizers. And biofertilizers are not the colloquial term that's used in permaculture and natural farming for these like big barrels of fermented stuff. That's not the scientific term. The scientific term biofertilizer refers to microbes that provide fertilizers in situ to plants internally and on roots. So what I've learned is that we can actually reduce things and change things and endophytically inoculate plants so that they get the biology within them that they need, because most of the nutritional value of plants is determined by the inner life. It's not just the rhizosphere and the stuff on the outside of the roots interacting. It's what's inside the plant. So something I mentioned earlier was rhizophagia. It's primary. It's before mycorrhizal fungi. And it was definitely used by mycorrhizal fungi as a pathway. But this is something that is brand new, and it looks like this. This is the first color diagram of this process created. One of the authors of the paper that released this concept went over this with me, and I did an interview with him on this. But what happens is, as they release exudates at the root tip, fungi and bacteria, and we're talking about like soil yeast fungi, right? So very simple. And they're taken in and they're circulated in here, and they're bombarded with reactive oxygen. And so their cell walls are removed, and they leak electrolytes. And then their cell walls repopulate as they circulate in the root hairs. And this action actually elongates the root hairs. So root hair growth is part of rhizophagy. And then they're released again at the tips of the root hair. They're like actually like kind of like squirted out bit by bit. And then they repopulate there completely. And some of them are consumed in this process. Some of them are completely consumed, which means that plant roots are eating bacteria and fungi, which, you know, is a new concept to many. So to circle back, though, to connect it to the EM, one of the things I learned about was the members of EM, several of them can act as biocontrol, plant growth promoting bacteria, and endophytic fungi. So the cerveza yeast, the baker's yeast, the brewer's yeast that is so common is actually an endophyte. And it kind of makes sense. And then what's so cool about what I've learned with this book is life makes more sense to me now. Like evolutionarily, I understand the way the world works fundamentally, like from like why plants are the way they are to like why soil works the way it does. Like, and so I figured out like EM, because EM has all those yeasts in there, and it has all these plant growth promoting bacteria. I started really realizing the value of it, and then I started doing research on the research that was out there on EM, and it's really fascinating. It as a fertilizer for plants, it depends on the soil. And so you could have like really good soil, and you would have some of these things already present, right? Which makes sense, right? If they're endophytic and in nature. But the way it breaks things down, the way it reduces the soil is incredible. So let's say you've got a pathogenic problem. You've got your plant showing all this stress, this and that. And then you're testing the soil and you're like, oh, I'm in the pathogenic, the viral zone. And you use EM on your soil and on your plant, you lower things 30 millivolts within hours, which is huge. I think it's 57 millivolts is 1 pH scale. And they do connect. Remember, as things get more reduced, they're more waterlogged. And then pH is hydrogen, so H2O. Everything always connects. And that's why it's really important to have the visuals. And if you just go to my website, you can see that I give away tons of pictures on the website, because I want people to have that moment almost without even getting the book. So they're like on my page freaking out, being like, this is the way the world is, you know? And it's like, yes. So yeah. And you asked about how expensive the book is. Well, this book is $75. And the books that I researched, the books that I bought, they're all college textbooks. And kind of my talent as an English teacher is I take all that information and make it into language that we can communicate with children around and teenagers around. And I make it all into visuals. And then I get those experts who wrote those papers to look at it and tell me what I did right or wrong. And then I fix it. So yeah, there's no other book like this. Yeah, I mean, there's no other book like this. And I thought I was going to do something completely different when I thought I was just going to like kind of rehash what I already knew and do some connecting between disparate things like Korean natural farming and Elaine's work. And you know, I thought I was going to like connect some people, but I went really below it all down to the enzyme, microbe, and even element and nutrient and their actual interactions. So, but I've done it in a way that's not going to bury anyone, and hurt anyone's brains, because I kept it visual. And so let me just read some things to you. So do you guys know who Dr. David Holmgren is? He's the co-creator of the concept of permaculture. Bill Mollison was a college professor and he was a 17-year-old kid. So it's like, he's a genius, right? And he's still alive. So if you've not heard of him, he is this like reliquary of living wisdom. And he's also just incredible. You know, the cool thing about this is going to liberate our farmers. I wrote this with all the actual calculations that they can do this at 10,000 acres. They can do this at 100,000 acres. Like I literally made it so that a gardener and an industrial farmer could both pick it up and be like, what? And then like realize how in 5 minutes they could run because what I did was I set it up with charts. I'm all about making things easy. So it's like, and then diagrams and formulas. So you just plug in the numbers. And it's like, these are my compost ingredients if you want to do compost, right? But you're like, oh, well, I have, I did a soil test or I did a plant sap analysis test and I need particular plant growth promoting bacteria and so you're like, okay, well, what are you looking for? Heavy metal buffers, pathogen fighters? What about ISR, SAR, you know, ROS scavenging, you know, the reactive oxygen scavenging inside the plant roots? That's very, very necessary. Arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, ecto, ericoid, orchid, yeasts, silicate, zinc solubilizers, iron chelators. Diazotrophs, those are the nitrogen fixers. The potassium, the phosphorus solubilizers. Potassium you don't need to worry about. That's just everywhere. But yeah. And then I go through everything. So you literally can create charts. You have all the different agars you can use. You can actually grow your own microbes. I've designed, because Peter McCoy of Radical Mycology got me all excited about working with microbes and liquid culture mycelium. And then I realized that same concept of the jar, and then that you could put a syringe through the top and you've got a sterile space inside. That's exactly what we need to do the the rhizobium. You could also do Rhizophagus intradices, but that's a AMF. But you could do all these bacteria in these jars. You have to do AMF in bag systems. You have to actually partner with root plants, and then you actually turn the soil from, and that's also in here. But the idea is I wanted to give everyone the tools so that you don't need to buy the microbes on the internet. Maybe you do once, so you can get them, or you can, find them or identify them. And so I wanted everyone to have all the tools. I wanted it to be highly visual. I wanted all the formulas. I wanted all the charts. So you literally could create I have a checklist chart at the end too. And got a huge references section here. So if you like the reference section and the index, if you're into that, I've got that for you too. But yeah, I've got a holistic mineral review here. So you have your deficient, toxic, adequate, source, amount needed, duration and timing, your soil management plan, your holistic plan here. I really have tried to create something that answers every possible question, problem, situation that we could have with the soil. And in doing so, it has completely changed my perspective of how our bodies work, how even the foods I'm eating. Because despite him not wanting to be like to record the conversation, he explained why like scientists are chomping at the bit and they're trying to get the medical people to speak up, but they won't speak up. Different foods have different effect on the body in terms of EH and redox. And so we are very, very quickly going to have health, understandable to not just like all of us, but like industry-wide. So the food that we eat, the soil that we get, the medicine, we're going to be like, oh, well, I'm reading this EH and this pH. So there's no way I'm taking that on right now. No way I'm eating that. No way I'm going to go do this instead. We are going to see so many changes, and we're going to get rid of so much. We're going to streamline so much, because so much of the things that we're doing that we're sort of working half the time, and we're like, oh no, 60% of the time this works for a patient, or I worked on my farm, like all that kind of like weird uncertainty. This is where most of the answers are. It's that other leg. It's the bioelectric side of things that we never considered until really recently. And part of the reason why it was so difficult is because you had to have like a platinum. All right. So with like reading an EH, for instance, you have to have like a platinum electrode. The electrode gets populated by bacteria, not fungi, particularly bacteria, within like a certain amount of like minutes or seconds. And you have to take the readings away from everything because it picks up everything. And like, this is like the true EH, and it's very difficult. And so we're just getting good at testing these things. It's the same thing with Sap test analysis. We just started doing it. And then the bionutrient meter, using light to tell you the nutrients that are inside a plant that in a grocery store setting, that's being worked on right now. But what they realize is they can't give you a set reading. They need to actually diagnose all the readings to understand the range of things. So anyway, it's really exciting what it opens up, because possibilities are incredible. What was that last question? I saw it pop up. What will the book teach us, or something?
How much will your book teach us intentionally or inadvertently about human nutrition and biochemistry in addition to plant nutrition? It sounds like they're very related.
It depends on how much you know, really. You know what I mean? Because it's like, because these things are true, when you put them up there, it's not like I'm implying it as much as I'm just stating what's true, and then it is true, so it implies it, like reveal. Does that make sense? I actually actively try not to put myself in it and my opinions in it at all, because I want that to be a clear pathway of non-interference. I've worked with so many students over the years. I have thousands of students online right now. I've worked with thousands of students in person. And the biggest problem I see in schooling and education is the educator putting themselves all over the information, and trying to like own it. And I really feel like opening that door, like if you read my Permaculture Student 2 book, which is free on my website, thepermaculturestudent.com. It's over 400 pages. It's peer reviewed. It's the first peer reviewed permaculture book ever. It's used in colleges and universities. It's the first accredited permaculture book in North America by a government body. you're going to gain more out of this, if that makes sense, because you're going to look at the holistic systems, that not just soil, but the trees and depth, and does that make, and the water systems and all those kind of things. So I don't know personally for you how much over, you know what I mean? I don't know how deep. I mean, you could read this and understand more than I, you know what I mean? Because of the way I've set it up. And that's, I think, part of the reason why it's worked, like why people like, Dr. David Holmgremes says soil is so complex, diverse, mysterious, and fundamental to plant, animal, human, and planetary health. It can be daunting for everyone, from those dabbling with food growing for the first time to experienced gardeners and farmers finding things not working like they used to. To find and recommend a reference that integrates and clearly explains the diversity of soil fertility building practices with the latest scientific understandings is difficult, to say the least. Matt Powers' Regenerative Soil is the reference I will be using and recommending for those working from the backyard to the back paddock. And I really believe that it has that value. And I have Rutgers University, their top, my colleges, recommends it. So it's an incredibly valuable book. It's written so that you will understand it, and it's written so that you will be able to look at those pictures and ponder upon them and study other things and come back to them and remember them, and it will continue to deepen in meaning because it is nature. That's the thing I'm trying to do, is that, like, this is a piece of comprehensible nature. It's not me, you know what I mean? And so when you're taking it on board, the possibilities and potential for in-depth for understanding don't have a limit. I mean, it's only limited by our lack of imagination and diligence and persistence, I would say. So it's the most incredible project I've ever had the privilege to work on, and it's a little surreal that I wrote it, to be honest. I like go through it and I'm like, this is amazing, and it's nothing like any of my other books. I feel like I'm a meditator, I'm a prayer. I wake up every morning and meditate for an hour and pray through the whole thing, and I feel like this was a gift for me, given to me to give to others. And so I'm incredibly grateful. Yes, I mean, there are people who I was learning from read my book and were like, well, that's just the best way to, and it was like, okay. So I don't know. I'm flabbergasted that I am where I am. I feel incredibly grateful every single day to be doing what I'm doing. I feel like I somehow got entered into like the Olympics of soil science and mycology, and I don't know how I got there, but there's all these amazing athletes and minds, and they're just doing these amazing feats, and they're like, do it too, and I'm like, okay, and it just, I really am grateful to be here. All right, so let's do one more question, and then I'm gonna roll.
Yeah, so we have, let's see, you can tell your deficiency some from, okay, so I think that was a response to a question in the chat. There was one like small question, just like to reiterate something that you had talked about. You talked about the 17-year-old and someone didn't catch the name. The 17-year-old.
Oh, that's David Holmgren.
David Holmgren. Okay.
That's the co-creator of Permaculture. And
okay.
It's a fantastic story. He was 17, Holmgren. Yeah, and Bill was, in his prime, probably in his 40s, I think. And what Bill did was take his brilliant ideas and help solidify them, and then they began to really co-evolve these ideas. Bill went back to work with the Aborigines. I mean, majority of permaculture is inspired by Australian Aborigines. And it didn't come out as strongly, I think, as it would have if Australian policies with the Aborigines weren't what they were. I mean, they were still taking away children from their families in the 80s. There's movies about this and documentaries. It's awful. And there's a national guilt associated with this that's very prevalent. And they're trying to address it, Meliodora, that's the best. That's right. Yeah, sorry.
Several of the questions are, is it true trees talk to each other? We have access.
Well, okay. They send signals.
Let me just get through them. We have access to bait. How often should we add it to the soil? Let's see. Mycorrhizal, I guess you did that one. It seemed like there was one more. Oh yeah, about the soil test. How do you determine if you don't do soil testing, what are deficiencies?
Oh, like I was saying, plant sap analysis. You see what actually is flowing in the plant. So instead of like the plant leaf matter, where they take the whole plant and then they like quick burn it, and then they're doing like that test to see what's in it. You look what's actually flowing in the xylem and phloem. Actually, I think it's actually specific to the phloem. And you actually look at what's in the plant in that very moment. Yeah, here we are. So 142. It's always good to have a good index, right? Yeah. So the thing is, when you do the traditional whole plant tissue analysis, it can disguise deficiencies. It measures everything that's been in the leaf and is currently in this and is cycling. And so what you're doing with the plant sap analysis test is seeing what is circulating, right. But you're doing it in the first fully grown, so the newest leaf on top, and then the oldest leaf on the bottom. And the reason we do that is because in the plant sap, it's the alarm to make dinner. In the plant sap, you get to see what they're actually passing around, and you can see the nutrients, you can see the microbes, and it's way more accurate. All right, so let's go to those other questions.
Yes, I think there was the one about the do plants really communicate? I think was or do trees really talk?
I can answer that. Yeah. So like the way we communicate, no, but they do communicate 100%. And the sad thing though is when you begin to study this and realize why they communicate and how they communicate, you realize that the forests, the national forests of North America, are all just the equivalent of street strangers in their concrete little balls in New York City. There's no real difference because they were all grown in sterile growing medium in these like nurseries, and then put out like a military operation, and Douglas firs everywhere, and instead of having a mother tree have their children grow up around them, exchanging genetic information, teaching them, protecting them, giving them nutrients while they're still in the lower canopy, the understory, giving them sugars and photosynthetic, nutrition. We've got these stranger trees and these forests that are actually not all interconnected. They're not. And we're the few remaining places that are, like the redwoods, the coastal forests and stuff, they're severely under attack, or they're so mismanaged that they're all burning. So it's a really, really, it's really cool, but it also brings this burden of responsibility that we need to be inoculating our trees. We need to honor mother trees, because they literally are passing on information and preparing those plants in a way that we can't. They're giving them information about past seasons, past extremes, past diseases and viruses. It can't be calculated by us. It literally is incalculable what is being taught, what is being passed on. But we know it's happening. We've been able to tell that much. So yeah, they are communicating. but sadly they aren't communicating because of the way we've man-made the forest over and over again. Almost there. Sorry, my family's in the other vehicle waiting on me. We were this was not supposed to happen. Again, it's 2020, right? Or 2021 now. It's like they're twins. And if anything can go wrong, it will. And it was $15 that someone along the line had. I would have had it all this morning, but I had to wait hours for the process to process while we were there.
Well,
so
we appreciate
it is all
you coming
good
out, and you did your best, and we're happy that you made it.
Yeah, thanks for.
Yeah, and you know, I have that event this week, so everyone's invited to the event. It is r-future.world. That's the website. So www.r-future.world. And that's like a transportation link, and then it takes you to my course website, which is the Kajabi platform, which is an incredible education platform. And there you can sign up for free. All the talks, all the interactives, all the live Q&As are free. Elaine Ingham, of course, will be there. Elaine is, you know, everything I do, Elaine's going to be there, right? But also we've got incredible people. We've got Chef Sean Sherman, the best-selling author, the award-winning author. We've got Jean-Martin Fortier, the market gardener. He's a best-selling author as well. We've got Antoinette Marquez, Amacy Beauty. We have biochar experts. We have William Padilla Brown, Cassandra Posey from MycoFest. We've got Trad Cotter of Mushroom Mountain. We've got Paul Stamets of Fungi Perfecti, revealing the most incredible stories. Not heard on Joe Rogan, all new. But yeah, no, we've got an incredible event this week that you are all invited to. You can download it for less than $50 if you want to keep it all. You guys are upset that Joe Rogan moved to your state or something? That's funny. But my point is anyway that like the information that Paul shares is incredible, and it's not, you know, all over the internet. It's actually stuff I've never heard before. That completely like opened my mind about a lot of things about Paul and about myself too. That I just didn't know.
Do you know if it will be
what?
He'll be talking about the bee research? You know, with
we talked about that a little bit. I interviewed him for it. So I interviewed him, and he usually talks about the bees, and we did talk about that. He talked about the bee mushroom thing, which is going to come out, and it's kind of secret. He talked about that a little bit, but we actually talked about his business. We talked about starting up and some of the early wins and some of the hard times. And it was really incredible, actually. The thing with this event is because so many people have worked so hard to get where they are, they really care about sharing how they did it, what worked and what didn't. And so I've never been to anything online like this. And I'm getting to see the talks as they come in, and I'm uploading them, so it's pre-recorded so that there's no technical difficulties. Cause that's the number one thing I have a short attention span to a degree. Unless I'm fascinated, I'm going to go look for what fascinates me. And then auditorily, I'm an auditory kind of person. I'm a musician. And so when the sound starts messing up in the Zooms or anything like that, I have a hard time paying attention. If it's like a all-day summit or anything, I'm gone. And so I was like, it had to be really high quality. It had to be really good. It had to be transformative. And so that's what it is. And it's there for free. I hope you all join. I have two of my permaculture books, the Permaculture Student 1 and 2, for free on my website. I've got gardening courses that are free. Your Best Garden is on my website as well. I've got introductory little courses on permaculture for free. My YouTube has, I think, over 500 videos, and I've got my entire audiobook for the Permaculture Student 2 for free on YouTube. So I've really tried to give back as much as I possibly could. I spent 2 years creating the first peer-reviewed permaculture textbook, and then I gave it away. But it's a human right to know how to live regeneratively on this planet. You know, it's the most important thing, I think. And if you would like to purchase my books, you can go to www.thepermaculturestudent.com, because I always feel like I'm a student, a forever student of nature, always learning, always growing. And you can go there, you can get those free books. You can buy ebooks, you can buy the physical books, and I will get them to you. I've got plenty. So please feel free to order some.
Well, I'm glad we got to see the first of them hot off the press, or 15 hours later, hot off the press, I guess. Or you had to wait quite a while, but
yeah, the madness.
So much for sharing your enthusiasm for the soil and kicking us off. And we'll see you next week at your conference. And I've shared it in the chat for everyone to be able to link up to it. And yeah, so we'll send you off to go make dinner.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Live regeneratively.
Thanks for coming.